Isn't it good to be back? Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to the Pinkham Preview Show with the return of Championship football, of domestic football after that pause for the international break. Which, in the end, I think having going into that Blackburn game, thinking we would have quite liked it to have, then come off the back of a win at Ewood Park maybe wasn't the best thing. Of course, Norwich travel to the CBS Arena tomorrow for the Paddy Davitt derby, Coventry against Canaries City. We want your thoughts, your feelings, your views, anything at all, whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube or X this afternoon, or even if you're watching after the event. We want to know how you're feeling about that game at the CBS Arena. Connor Southwell joined by Samuel Seaman. Sam, how was your international break? I think I'm on record that look, they're not my favourite things in the entire world. I'd much rather us be able to crack on with the championship season, particularly after just 4 games of it. But did you enjoy the break? Did you get up to anything in particular that was worth shouting about?
Yeah, it was all right. It was I had a little sort of mini holiday, staycation, although I absolutely hate that word. So shame I've already used it. But I kind of, although I did miss the football a little bit and having more to do in that sense. I think after the end of the transfer window, I probably needed a little bit of a break. So I think the October and November breaks, I'll probably be twiddling my thumbs a little bit more and a little bit more frustrated that there isn't any football to watch. But for this one, I think after the drama of the transfer window and feeling like you can never leave your house to go to the shop without the potential of a breaking news story, I think I was slightly glad of an international break. But certainly the last few days I've been looking forward to the trip to Coventry and what should be a really interesting game. But you've probably achieved a lot more than me in the international break. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd use the word achieve, to be honest. I'm not sure how impressive it was or not. But yeah, look, I did run Norwich alongside a host of other people last Sunday, which was brilliant. It's a fantastic event. A huge credit to the Community Sports Foundation and the volunteers and the guys that help and contribute to put that event together. Mirko Topic was, although I didn't see him, I must confess, but he set the race on its way. I was more focused on thinking, oh goodness me, how am I going to drag myself around this? And part of the course does involve running around Carrow Road, so I went around there last Sunday. It was good fun. Although I wasn't saying that to myself 8k in. I think is probably fair to say when you've got the last k and a half, which is all uphill. But yeah, fantastic attendance, some really brilliant people doing it for some fantastic causes, and just glad I got round. So that's how I spent my weekend. And then thankfully this week, I think it's felt a little bit ordinary in terms of getting back to normal. But yeah, I agree with you. That sort of post transfer window stuff was that the break was most needed. Good afternoon to Jonathan who joins us. No, Paddy, we're wrapping him up in Cottonwall ahead of that homecoming tomorrow, so you'll see him on Team News Live as well. And he's also added he hopes he has a miserable 90 plus minutes on Saturday. Secretly, Sam, I'm sure you're with me on this. I think he's probably more yellow and green these days, even though I don't think he'd maybe like to admit that publicly.
Yeah, I was going to go 50-50. I mean, if you think he's actually at the point of crossing over to the yellow and green side, then
maybe not that far. Yeah, maybe not that far.
Yeah, I don't know how well that would go down with him, to be fair. But I think he's. I don't think he'll be crying any tears if Norwich win on Saturday. He always says he sees it as a win-win. So which might be a diplomatic way of putting it, but. Yeah, I would say probably 50-50 based on what I've seen. But he tends to keep himself pretty calm for those ones. Although that might have been a little bit tough with the Amancle Force and double last year.
Yes, and I had the unique experience of probably being the only one in the Norwich City home, and maybe there was someone else I don't know who sat next to a Coventry fan when those goals went in. I can tell you, he wasn't best pleased, but I think it was more about the rewrite that he had to do on all of his copy, perhaps rather than the actual goal itself. We're going to be live for the next half an hour. We'll see how we go as well. We want, as I said, your comments, your questions, just like Tyler has done on YouTube, who thinks there's going to be an anti-Crnac masterclass tomorrow. And I think we'd all like that. I mean, Sam, you spoke to him over the break, and I think he was quite candid, wasn't he, in that chat about the starts of the season that he's had. Clearly, Blackburn was a stride forward, and I guess we could probably pad this out into a wider formation / attacking profile and which of the various profiles Liam Manning goes to, but feels like probably that one at Blackburn was the one that has got the most out of him so far this season. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, I think he said to me he can do much better. So he obviously feels not only does he have more levels to reach, but he's got quite a few based on his first few performances of the season, which I have to say I'm a little bit surprised by, because he looked so good in pre-season, and I know we always say, you know, that's not much to go on, and I suppose this is evidence of that. But sometimes you get that feeling. I think we had it with Todd Cantwell, probably is a good example, back in 2019 when they went up to the Premier League for the first time under Daniel Farker, where they just have a good few weeks. They look a little bit different. They've got that level of confidence, and I thought we saw that from Crnac in pre-season, and then he didn't seem to deliver on it, or hasn't seemed to deliver on it so far this season. So I've got to say I'm a little bit surprised that he hasn't started the season particularly well. But to be honest, I agreed with his own assessment of his performances so far. I think I spoke to a few fans after Blackburn who were actually really pleased with his performance. So maybe there are some steps in the right direction, but I have to say he still feels a little bit sluggish to me. He feels like when he gets on the ball, it's almost like he's been asleep for, since the last time he had the ball. He actually referenced, when he spoke to me, the fact that he felt the team as a whole needed to make sure they were staying focused for longer periods in games, and were switched on for longer. And I wonder if part of that was him sort of in his own brain speaking about his own performances, because I think that's been a little bit of a problem for him early on. But yeah, I think, the formation wise, last week probably did get the best out of him. As I said, I spoke to a lot of people who were really pleased with his performance, and although I didn't see a significant change, I think there was slight improvement, and not only for him but for the rest of the team. Really, I hope Liam Manning doesn't watch Tactics Ball, because that's been a running commentary of the formation he's using so far this season, and he's admitted that he's a little bit perplexed by the discussion, and admittedly, even at Blackburn, there were times when they looked like a back three, they looked like a back five, but it did feel like by far the significant majority of that game was a traditional back four, was more of a formation that you can easily recognise, and where players were in positions that they've played in before. And for me, that's that's the main thing. I think Manning talks a lot about getting players into positions and areas of the pitch where they can affect things, and I completely understand that. I think you look at Crnac and you'd say a slightly wide number 10 is almost the best position for him, but ultimately he's never played that role before. Even if under Johannes Torp he didn't like being quite as wide as he was, ultimately he's played 40 plus championship games in that role, and he understands what that role requires. So I think he's a good example of where, even if in a perfect world, in 15 games, that is the best position for someone, when you've got Manning coming in with the goal of promotion this season, with a much more of a short-term focus, as well as obviously the mid-term and long-term focuses we know they still have, than maybe his predecessor had. I think for now, the more pragmatic switch to a 4-4-2, and ultimately this is what we said Manning would bring to the club when he first arrived. I think that makes sense in the short term for a club that is aiming for promotion this season. So we'll see if he goes back to the back three in that formation. I'd expect he probably will at some point this season. But for me, right now, I think going forward, the 4-4-2 makes more sense.
Yeah, and I think it's not just obviously anti-Crnac in that mix. It's about what it did probably to the other players. I think the sight of Chris Gorin and Josh Sargent playing together would have been incredibly exciting. Obviously, Diallo in a more advanced role, but equally, I think I'd add the fullbacks to that. Just the balance that Fisher, Crnac, Cruzene, Diallo kind of relationship had on both flanks. They looked more solid. They looked more balanced in an attacking sense as well. I mean, there was a really good moment in the first half that stood out to me where Cruzene got beyond Diallo and delivered a wonderful cross for Sargent, I think it was. So there was lots to like around that shape. And I agree. I think with Liam Manning, actually, I think there probably has been a little bit too much attention on formations rather than actually how it's playing. I think a lot of the criticism has been about the blend of profiles, and we speak about players having an adaptation period. Well, that's the same for Liam Manning and his coaching team. They'll be learning about the squad, the combinations, what works, what doesn't work, and it's getting a feel for that early on in this campaign. And this is where a game like tomorrow is going to be so exciting. So, having said we're not going to talk about formations, Sam, we'll do that. Do you see him sticking with what we saw at Blackburn in terms of shape. Whether you want to describe that as a 4 or a 3 or a 5 is entirely up to you. But do you think we'll see something similar tomorrow from Norwich City?
Yeah, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't, to be honest. I understand Manning, well, obviously when he's first come into the building, he's looked at that group and decided a back three is the best way to go. But when you look at the evidence of Blackburn, of some of the games where they used the back three and they actually struggled quite a bit, I mean, it's hard to argue for any reason really that the back three is better or look better. I think especially given you're trying to kind of build momentum. And for Norwich, although there have been plenty of positive signs, one thing there hasn't been is consistency. And that's what I'm sure Manning is looking for. It's what he said he was looking for in his pre-match press conference. So if you're looking for consistency, you've got a good performance away at Blackburn and probably a team that won't be in the same echelons of the table as Coventry will come the end of the season, but still a trip on the road, a sort of tough, typical Championship game. And if you see all the evidence that the team's working in that environment, why would you not keep it the same for a trip to Coventry? So, yeah, although, as I said, you can't ever define it as one base formation, as I thought our tactical columnist Ben Lee wrote about very well earlier in the week, I think it will look more like a 4-4-2 and more like what we saw against Blackburn. Would you expect something similar, Connor?
Yeah, I think so, particularly given how much he's kind of spoken about continuity, stability. I think you could see the volume in that. There is a kind of a feeling of, well, if it's not broken, don't try and fix it with this. I think the one point I would make is I'm kind of wary of the talent that Coventry have in attacking areas and whether that would maybe persuade them to change to something that is maybe a little bit more pragmatic in its nature and maybe back to the flat three that we see. I think Mason Clark, Thomas Asante, Jack Rodoni is a fantastic sort of late arriver into the box. So if you don't have, I don't know, kind of if you don't go man for man in that midfield with Torp in it as well, Grimes, who's a very good distributor and ball player, I think there's a world where you could possibly get overran in those areas. But again, it's risk and reward, isn't it? We saw Chris Goran drop in, Topic and McLean covered a lot of ground at Ewood Park, and that was against the free in midfield as well until the red card. So they dealt with that pretty well, I thought, and had the energy and the legs to get around it. So it's about how you apply that and how you, I guess, deal with those threats. But I think they have probably the potential to do that. And I think it's also, we know the way that he wants to work, which is about giving the opposition something to think. And yes, there's absolutely that side of, well, how does it affect the Coventry from an attacking perspective if you do that and the risks you take? But also think about the questions you ask if you stick two men on their two centre-backs, if you get wingers high up the pitch, you then ask real questions of them at home, albeit, that's a huge risk to take against the team. So again, maybe that's a consensus that we will throw out there in terms of, what would you like to see Norwich do tomorrow? Do you think it is one of those where, because of the opposition at home, will get into their record at the start of this season, the goals they've scored, and you only need to ask QPR about Coventry's impact at home, and they will talk to you about obviously that 7-0 defeat they had against them. This is a team that is capable of scoring goals. So do you sort of go cautious and kind of look to counteract that, or do you actually be bold in your principles and try and force the issue a little bit from a Norwich perspective? That would be the question for me. I think probably in truth we will see both. Let's get into some early comments, and we'll start with this one from Nigel, who says Norwich have a very similar record against Coventry as they do Ipswich, unbeaten in 16-17 years. Players will know we have a decent record at Coventry tomorrow, and I expect a similar result to a 3-2 win. He's going with a lot of goals, so we'll come on to those, going very early with the prediction. Twitchy Terry, which is on the point of Vladan Kovacevic. When are we building Vlad's statue then? Yeah, he's a really interesting goalkeeper, Sam, in that I've not quite seen a goalkeeper like him. I intend that as a compliment as well, in that, he can send your heart racing. I think that's fair to say, in terms of some of his actions and some of his decisions and the aggressiveness of his position. But I think we've seen, particularly in the 2 away games at Portsmouth and at Blackburn last time out, he can produce some unbelievable saves. And I guess it's just about, from a Norwich perspective, learning to live with both sides of that personality, I guess, because I think there's an argument you don't get the quality saves without some of the heart-inducing moments that we've seen so far from him.
Well, not at Championship level. I think if you had both both sides, if you had the incredible saves and he could always sweep up very effectively and never gave the ball away, he'd probably be being readied by Liverpool as their replacement for Alisson at some stage. So, yeah, I think if you're Norwich, you either go with a kind of an all-rounder goalkeeper, a solid goalkeeper, which I think Angus Gunn probably fit into the category of, where, you know, maybe he wasn't going to change the game for Norwich. He wasn't going to win them games himself very often. I think he could do it at times, but he wasn't a kind of James Trafford type figure where you looked at him and you thought, wow, that's an incredible goalkeeper. But he also, he didn't set hearts racing in the same way that Kovacevic has. He probably made fewer mistakes than I'd expect we'll see from Kovacevic over the season at large. But, you know, as that comment showed, when he gets it right, he's the sort of lovable goalkeeper that fans and players and head coaches love to have on their team when it goes right. So, yeah, the balance for Norwich is just trying to get as many of the good days as you possibly can without many of the bad days. I think, unfortunately, we've probably already seen a couple of them, and maybe the frequency is higher at the moment because he's still getting used to the Championship. He's obviously needing a little bit of a confidence boost after what was a very difficult spell at Sporting Lisbon and also quite a poor loan at Legia Warsaw. So, yeah, I think he's still building that confidence up. I think a penalty save against Portsmouth, an unbelievable double save, as you referenced, against Blackburn, and some of those performances, I think, will be building that confidence up, and hopefully he's got more of that than he did when he arrived in the building. But certainly Norwich, you know, you looked at that business, what they were doing, it felt like they were looking for a rough diamond, and I think we've seen exactly that over the first few games. But, you know, those players exist to be honed, and that's what coaches are for, really. That's what Tony Roberts, head of goalkeeping, is there for. That's what Liam Manning and his coaching staff are there for. It's to support Kovacevic and to try to get some of those good days more than the bad days. So as much as we talk about his own personal characteristics, the importance of confidence, momentum, things like that, it's also about externally how Norwich can give him that help and how they can provide for him, and almost, as well as what they can do on the training pitch, provide a system that gets the best out of him, maybe covers some of those weaknesses and helps him with the options for that distribution. Because I think a lot of the time when a player loses a ball, you know, when you're trying to play the ball out from the back and you're trying to play that risky football, yes, obviously at some point you have to always say, okay, enough's enough, and kind of kick it long. But a lot of the time, the reason why players delay and they get themselves into those difficult positions is because they haven't got good options in front of them. So I think part of it is about the players around Kovacevic, the coaches around Kovacevic. But for me, the difference maker that you'd hope will mean a higher ratio of those good days going forward is the confidence he'll have gained from those away games you referenced previously. And going to Coventry, I think, although hopefully it's not going to be too many saves, I think you have to say with their attacking quality, he will be called into action a few times. And if he can have another good day tomorrow, then that will be big for Norwich. I think bigger than probably it has been at any other point in the season. So it'll be interesting to see how he delivers. And for me, although I probably wouldn't be quite in statue building territory yet, I think if he can get that ratio quite high and he can have, say, 35 good games this season, then Norwich will have a very good goalkeeper on their hands.
Yeah, he's at least got the iconic pose for a statue if we do get to those levels with Norwich City, which would be fantastic. Let's move to the left side of defence then, Sam, because this is the area where there are a few moving parts, I think, to discuss. Obviously, no Jeffrey Schlupp for at least this weekend. We'd probably expect that to be Wrexham, probably at the very least next week as well. Possibly even what's the game after that, Stoke away as well. But we'll see how we go. Liam Manning sort of put a couple of weeks on that hamstring injury sustained in the first part of the international break, which isn't ideal because, you know, you actually looked at the impact that he had when he came off the bench against Blackburn, flicked the ball on for Josh Sargent, albeit I recognise that Sargent did the rest of that, but it was probably a better cameo from him than we've seen up to that point. Lucien Mahovo, in kind of the other flip side of the coin, is on his way back to team training, but a little bit of time required for him to get up probably to match speed, having not had any of pre-season, and he's been out for a little while. So understandable that they maybe want to go cautiously with him. But what it does do, Sam, is give an opportunity to Ben Crnac, who Liam Manning was absolutely glowing about in his press conference on Wednesday. I'll be. I mean, you've been quite hot on Ben Crnac, I think, since he joined the club. I've been less so. Not in a sense of, I don't think he's very good. I certainly don't subscribe to that view. But probably just wanting to see maybe a little bit more from him. And I said this in the spaces in midweek. That's probably on me for expecting more out of a young player who was stepping into. I recognise he had the loan at Blackburn, but having his first year at the club. But actually, considering his injury layoff and the fact he didn't have a lot of pre-season there in terms of minutes and exposure, I've been really impressed with what he's done this season. And I guess now this is where it's an opportunity for him as much as anything. With those two guys out, he's got an opportunity to really stake his claim in this team now, hasn't he?
Yeah, definitely. And I think you look at maybe the time he's had at the club so far, and it's kind of been, for me, the ideal progression for a young player. I agree there probably was more that he could have got out of his abilities last season, but to come in, get a lot of championship minutes under your belt, be what I would say was a relatively sturdy backup. Obviously, we saw Lucian Mahovo play that role towards the end of the season in a really exciting way. Callum Doyle earlier on was playing left back a bit more, but Crnac was kind of that very solid squad option. I thought he's come into the season much improved, and although maybe there was a little bit of a tail off in form after what I felt was quite a strong start in yellow and green, I think when you look at that progression, someone coming in, providing a decent amount in the short term, but still progressing and improving, and then the next season kicking on and being a real first team option and a potential key player for the club. I think that's actually kind of the ideal progression that you would want from most of those players. You look at the likes of Cianats, who we spoke about earlier, Oscar Schwartau, I suppose, Anis Ben Slimane, probably that was the plan when he initially arrived, even though it's not looking like it's going to go that way for him. Most of those signings, you would have said last season, if they can come in, be a solid squad option behind players who maybe weren't likely to get the club promoted, but had a bit more of that championship experience and things like that, and then this season they could kick on and find new levels, then you would have said that was kind of exactly what Ben Napper was almost aiming for with that summer of very young, very potential-driven recruitment. So I think, although things haven't gone to plan with a lot of those players, Crnac has kind of been the perfect example. Only cost the club £1.5 million from Aston Villa, so a lot cheaper than a lot of players who I think have done a lot worse for Norwich so far. So yeah, I think he can go on and be a key player for Norwich. The question now is, with Lucian Mahovo coming back, kind of how that battle plays out, because obviously last season it felt like the chance was there for Crnac when I think there were some injuries in defence. Doyle ended up having to play in the centre of defence a lot of the time, and that opened up that left back role. But that was the moment at which Mahovo burst out of the under-21s and kind of claimed that spot for himself. So when Mahovo is back in contention to be playing games, and Manning also praised him quite heavily in his pre-match press conference, and although it would be too early for him to be involved, it sounds like Manning's pretty excited about the physicality he's added, some muscle that he's added and been working on while he's been out injured with that quad tear. I think that's going to be a really interesting battle when it comes around. As you mentioned, obviously Schlupp now being injured means there's unlikely to be a challenge to the left back role for a few weeks. So if he can perform well, let's say 2-3 weeks in a row, and he's got a decent opportunity with some of these games coming up, then you'd say that the role will probably be his own, as long as he doesn't make any major errors after that. So yeah, I think I'm excited by the way that he started the season. Probably not enough yet to say that he's going to be Norwich's first choice fullback kind of indefinitely. But yeah, as you said, the opportunity is definitely there with some of the injuries that they've had, and I'm sure he's looking at it, licking his lips quietly, and thinking, yeah, this is a real opportunity for him.
I like we spoke about the formation earlier on. I like the fact he almost allows them to slip in and out of those different formations at various points. He can tuck in as a third centre back. He offers that kind of fluidity and duality, I guess, to do that, with then Diallo sort of tucking in the case where they need to go to a 5. But it's the solidity that he supplies to Diallo, but also the ability to run beyond, as we mentioned in the Blackburn example earlier, when he did do that and delivered an excellent cross. Yeah, I think he's really come on leaps and bounds. And whilst we're on the defence, I mean, today is the day where the Turkish transfer window closes, I believe. I don't know the exact time on that, so I'll have a look while you're speaking in a moment. But clearly, Anis Ben Slimani and Shane Duffy have. It's all been quite quiet, to be honest, around those two. There's been a couple of links, haven't there, with Tunis for Slimani, which would obviously be a loan move to Tunisia, which before the AFCON coming up, you could see the allure of that if they do decide to enter club-to-club negotiations. That hasn't been the case yet. But this from Sam Love on Shane Duffy. Do we see Shane Duffy ever getting back into the team? When I think about Portman Road in a month now, I'd have Duffy. That's quite harsh on Jakub Medic, to be fair, who I don't think has done quite as bad as maybe Sam is suggesting there. But the Shane Duffy point, Sam, just to hone in on that one. What do you make of that? Do you see a world in which he comes back into the thinking? It feels like it's going to be quite difficult now with the pecking order that they've established, particularly with Rory McConville staying at the club.
Yeah, I think it's going to take an injury crisis for him to play for the club again, at least until you get kind of back to January, and there's the FA Cup, and there's there are things like that. I think it's been quite clear from the way that Manning has made his team selections that McConville is ahead of him in that pecking order. Obviously, you've got Jakub Medic, Harry Darling, Jose Cordoba, who I don't think has had a terrible start to the season, but already as part of that Ben Crnac discussion we've just had, is looking like he's kind of the next cab off the rank in terms of defenders, particularly on that left-hand side. So I suppose when you look at some of the squad crises that Norwich had last season, especially when you get into this kind of October-November period where there's a lot of Tuesday night games, you've probably got some players who are getting used to that intensity of Saturday, Tuesday, really regular games. Maybe that's when you might have some selection issues, some fitness issues. You want to manage the load a little bit, and then maybe Duffy gets onto the bench more often, and you might see him playing the sort of role that maybe Grant Hanley did before he left the club last January, coming on for the last 10 minutes to try and see out results and things like that. And I think for that role, you could definitely have much worse people with much less experience in that kind of situation. But yeah, you think he's got 4 centre-backs ahead of him, even if one of them gets injured or 2 of them, then you've got Ben Crnac, who Manning is clearly comfortable tucking in and playing as part of a back 3, and then having Papa Amadou Diallo as the left wing back. I think with the various options they have, both in terms of the personnel and also the formations they can change to cover for those roles, I think it would really take injuries or suspensions to 2 or 3 of those other defensive options for him to really get a look in, which is why I think for his prospects of getting football, really a move away in this period was the best solution. But ultimately, you have to understand he's also, he's got a family, he's got a life to think about after football, and financially, ultimately, I think if any of us were told you've got I don't know how old is he now, 33, so he's probably got 2-3 years left to earn an absolutely massive fortune, and then the income's going to drop off a cliff, and you won't have that source anymore. You've got to kind of set up your own life. I think a lot of people, especially when you've got a family and things like that, would find it difficult to accept a contract where you have to take a pay cut, for the sake of playing a few more games. So I can understand why maybe a move hasn't materialized if there hasn't been that offer on the table. But it's kind of a shame for him and for the club, because you want to see players playing, and I don't think that's likely, really.
Yeah, agreed. I know there's a perception of Shane Duffy externally, and that is what it is. He's remained quite a popular figure inside Carrow Road. I think the feeling is, even now, he's even though the summer maybe hasn't gone the way he would have hoped in terms of finding himself something, that he's remained a good character in and around that dressing room in spite of the situation. And clearly that's something for Liam Manning to manage as the season goes on. But I agree with you. It's a shame. I thought he had a good year last year. He played the most minutes of any Norwich City player. It probably tailed off a little bit towards the end, as it did for everyone, I think, in yellow and green. But it's a shame at this stage to not see him playing regularly, which ultimately is I'm sure what would be his sole ambition at this moment in time. Right, we've got nearly half an hour in, and we haven't mentioned Josh Sargent, which must be some kind of record for this season, but we are going to do so, not in any transfer context, but in this context, in that, Sam, he has been named the Championship Player of the Month for the month of August. He's become the 6th Norwich City player to win that award. I've already sort of told you who the other ones are, Sam, so I can't quiz you on it. So I'll throw it out there. Who are the other 5 who have won this award from a Norwich City perspective? You don't win anything, I'm afraid. I've got nothing to give you, unfortunately, but you can have the pride of knowing you got it right if you can get those names correct. I think there's a few obvious ones in there, maybe one that isn't. It was inevitable, wasn't it, Sam, given the goals, the contribution, but also his performances and probably the context of it as well. Loads of transfer speculation. The noise was constant throughout the summer. He kept his head down. He wore the armband for Norwich City on, for the majority of those games, including obviously the end of that Blackburn game when Kenny McLean went off, and had those pictures of him pounding the badge in front of the away end. It's been some month for Josh Sargent, as August always tends to be for him at Norwich City.
Yeah, and I actually hadn't really thought too much about the Player of the Month award, but as soon as it came into my orbit, I thought, it's just kind of common sense that he's been the best player in the Championship so far, and even without having watched too many other games in the division, I think you watch him playing, it's hard to really imagine any other players who can be playing better than him and still be in the Championship. To again bring that transfer context into it, I'm afraid I'm absolutely stunned that nobody's come in for him, and I suppose that's borne out in the fact that he's just been performing better than everyone else in the Championship. He's been he's been producing the same sorts of goal scoring performances that he has over the past few seasons. I think everyone's seen the progression he's made in terms of his all-round game since he first joined the club, and really he gives them absolutely everything. He's at the heart of everything. He can hold the ball up really well. He can run in behind really well. He's technically much, much, much better, I think, than when he first joined the club. And the ball, it felt, was bouncing off him quite regularly, and his technique didn't look quite good enough to excel at the level. But he's now, he looks like just the complete footballer. I would be surprised if he can really progress too much more on the pitch, to be honest. When you just look at what he's doing in the Championship. But actually, me and Paddy were talking about it the other day, and we were saying that he's still able to add to his game, because you mentioned that captain's armband, and he's clearly added even more kind of leadership and off the pitch to his game. I remember a time when it was after, I think they beat Watford 4-2 under David Wagner, and fans really weren't happy. He got taken off after something like 60 minutes because he was still coming back from an injury. And it was just after, Watford had scored, so that Watford were coming into it. And Sargent actually at the time kind of came out. I think he stuck his hand up and said he wanted to be the one to go and do the interview, because he recognised that fans were upset that he'd been taken off, and he was the one who went out, clarified the situation, kind of tried to boost the mood among the fan base. And that's the kind of real leadership that probably you need more in the dressing room, really. And when you've got players like Kenny McLean, obviously getting older, Grant Hanley has now left the club, Shane Duffy looks like he will before long as well, and you kind of need those players to step up in those leadership roles. Having someone like Josh Sargent, who at the age of 25, and he was probably showing it at kind of 23 and 24 as well, can really be a leader for the other players in the dressing room. I think he's shown another side to his game again. So, I don't know how much more he can really add, but he's absolutely defined those characteristics yet again to win what I think is absolutely a deserved Player of the Month award.
Yeah, and some statage for you. He's currently on 49 Championship goals for Norwich after his brace against Blackburn in that game at Ewood Park. Since his debut in the Championship, which was the 30th of July 2022, which feels like an absolute lifetime ago, Norwich had Dean Smith in charge. Only Joel Perreault with 51 has reached 50 goals in the competition. So that shows you just how impactful he's been. And also, just to clarify my Player of the Month question, it is 4 Norwich City players, but one of them has won it twice. So 6 Norwich wins, but 5 players. And that probably does give at least one of them away to you. We will obviously give you the answer to that before the end of the show. Sam, let's come to this question, then we'll come to the game on Coventry, because I think this ties in quite nicely with the Pelle Matson situation generally. Chris Andrews says, seems we have 2 defensive midfielders in Mirko Topic and Pelle Matson. how do you see Liam Manning fitting them into the formation? I mean, it's an interesting one. It's a question that I think has been asked since that Marcelino Nunez saga, which we don't want to delve back into. But I think the major question around Pelle Madsen has been, what type of player is he? Is he a direct replacement? Is he slightly different? I think, having spoken obviously to the Danish journalist and Peter Hansen, who works at Silkeborg as well as their head of talent, it's clear that he is a slightly different player. It's a really interesting one, isn't it, about how they go about accommodating him and getting him into that system that at the moment as well, you've got to take into account Kenny McLean, and his performance at Blackburn was very good, and we know Liam Manning is a fan. So it's a nice sort of competition and a nice place to be, I guess, if you're Liam Manning with those three options.
Yeah, definitely. And ultimately, as much as we are, and it seems like we ask the question every time, someone comes in and it doesn't look like there's a place in the team for them. How is that going to work? But in a way, that's kind of what you want as a head coach. As long as you've got enough opportunity for them not to kind of throw their toys out the pram and become a problem in the dressing room, that's exactly what you want. Because if you have backup players who look like backup players, then injuries, suspensions, losses of form are going to mean you've got a worse team than you had before. So, yeah, I think he'll be really pleased with that strengthening of the squad. And to be honest, I'm not sure it is necessarily just a choice between him and Topic. I could see a midfield with Madsen and Topic both in there at some point in the season, and actually in the long term, I wonder if that's kind of the direction that they want to be headed in, because it feels like when you look at the balance in that midfield under Torup, and probably even going back under David Wagner, they did try to have a little bit of that creativity in there, or at least more of that conventional flair in there with Nunez. Gabriel Sara obviously played that role very effectively under Wagner as well. And I think Kenny McLean can, even though he doesn't maybe have much flair, he can push forward and try to create chances, as I think we've seen at times this season. But you look at the way Manning did it at Bristol City, it was Max Bird and Jason Knight most of the time. Both of those are athletic footballers who can get up and down and be kind of box to box, but neither of them has any particular creative instinct to them or any flair. So I think Manning expects that to come from elsewhere in the team. I think at Bristol City, it came mostly from those kind of wide number 10 positions that we've spoken about. At Norwich, if he persists with the 4-4-2, it will probably come from Matthias Quiscoren behind Josh Sargent, as well as the wingers, looking at the moment at Ante Sienats and Papa Amadou Diallo. And then those midfielders are there more to provide the athletic running, to take the game from one box to the other, and then kind of let the others do the more creative, more instinctive work in an attacking sense. So I don't think it's necessarily a choice of Madsen and Topic, Madsen or Topic. I think you could see both of them in there together. But as you outlined, I think Kenny McLean's been excellent so far in the performances that he's produced after coming back from injury. Clearly, Manning is a fan and has actually said that he used to hope that McLean wasn't on the team sheet when he played against Norwich as the head coach of other clubs. So, yeah, there are a few options in there, and I'm interested to see how it plays out. Obviously, Madsen is a summer signing who they rate really highly and will want to get in there quite quickly. So I wonder what Manning does with that situation sort of going forward. But yeah, I don't think it's necessarily a case of one or the other, but it's certainly an interesting debate, and I'd say quite a high quality debate for Norwich when you look at maybe where it was earlier in the summer and the fact that they saw it as quite a significant priority. But how do you see it playing out, Connor, in terms of, obviously Madsen won't want to sit on the bench for too long, and we know how highly rated he is. So what do you think the solution could be going forward?
Yeah, it's interesting. I agree with everything really that you said there in terms of how it pans out. It's interesting, and it's probably a credit to Kenny McLean that he's maybe continues to force his way in. I mean, this is his fifth head coach now that has kind of placed him at the front of what they're trying to do at Norwich City, which speaks volumes about his level of performance, irrespective maybe of how you feel about Kenny McLean. And I think he's been a fantastic player for Norwich over a considerable period of time, and the leadership, stability, reliability that he offers in that midfield. The interesting bit for me is probably the point at which maybe you try and go to a Madsen Topic duo. If that's the way that Liam Manning wants to go, is there a scenario where you could fit all three in? Maybe who knows? Maybe particularly we just spent a portion of the the show a little while ago, speaking about Norwich's left back situation. Well, it could be that Kenny McLean's needed there in a couple of weeks if, God forbid, Ben Cruzene breaks down or there's an injury involved there, and Mahovo's not quite ready and Schlupp's out. So that might be a natural opportunity to get them in. But yeah, what an opportunity to rotate those midfielders. We've obviously got Liam Gibbs in the mix as well that we haven't discussed, and I thought he was good at Blackburn in terms of the cameo and the energy that he provided. And I actually thought it was quite wise and quite clever management from Liam Manning not to throw Pelle Matson in at Blackburn away, given the scenario, given they were a little bit under the cosh and before obviously Josh Sargent's second goal. So yeah, you're right. It's going to be really interesting to see how they solve that. But that's ultimately what Liam Manning wants. He's spoken about competition and almost playing those players off of each other to try and extract the best out of them. Miko Topic has clearly become a key player. I'm not sure they really have another midfielder like him. So probably feels more to me about Matson McLean with a Topic at this moment in time. But I think over the course of a 46-game season, Pelle Matson is going to get opportunities to play for Norwich City. And hopefully we see him in some capacity as well. But yeah, you're right. It's about that balance. And I actually think having 3 options there and 3 really high quality options, plus a Liam Gibbs as well, who I know we've kind of left out of this debate, and I'm consciously trying not to do that because I think he will be determined to have a role to say in this as well. Jacob Wright as well, who clearly isn't for this sort of segment and this game relevant to this conversation. But this is game 3, game 2, game 3, game 3.
Game 3, so he should be back for Wrexham.
Yeah. Exactly. So he comes into the conversation as well. That feels like a very healthy midfield mix to have at their disposal and for different kind of situations and scenarios as well. So yeah, it feels like those 3 are probably leading it at the moment. And hopefully when we see Pelle Matson, he can really put his case forward. But I'm fascinated to see how it evolves and how Liam Manning manages it going forward, because that is some group of midfielders that they've got at their disposal. Let's look ahead to the game tomorrow then, Sam. I mean, I'm going to, not to make this a daunting or more daunting trip than it is anyway, because we know what Coventry are like. They've won both of their home games so far, and one of those ended 7-1. So that goes to show you the quality in front of goal. But unbeaten after 4 championship games, most recently a draw at Oxford. The record goals total after 4 championship rounds with, I think, 14, which, let's be honest, is inevitable when you score 7 against QPR. But they also scored 5 away at Derby in what was a crazy 5-3 game there. They're the highest goal scorers in England's top 5 leagues so far. And it's also, according to their channels, the most Coventry goals in the first 4 rounds of fixtures since 1935. Of course, Norwich have a 100% away record as well. So something is going to have to give tomorrow. Not both of those statistics are going to be right in terms of, not both of those teams are going to have those records come 5 o'clock tomorrow evening. But it just shows, I guess, from a Norwich City perspective, and they have navigated away games really well, just, I guess, how difficult and how challenging a test this is going to be, and probably a real step up for them to see. We spoke about growth a lot and wanting to see that progress under Liam Manning. This is going to be a really good litmus test of where they're at under him, and probably the work that they've done over the last few weeks with him as well.
Yeah, definitely. I've written a piece that's gone out this morning, basically to that effect, that this is their toughest test so far, certainly on the road. Obviously at home they've played Millwall, who I think have been, a very well organised. Middlesbrough as well, I think, will be in and around that kind of, that upper echelon of the Championship table going forward. So, they have played some tough teams, but certainly on the road, as difficult as any Championship away game is. Obviously, Fratton Park, a famously tough place to go when you consider the atmosphere there, the dimensions of the stadium, the way that they play, their form there. In the previous season, but I don't think they're anywhere near Coventry in terms of the technical quality of their players. Watford obviously was the first away win of the season, and I think they were still kind of getting used to things after quite a few changes in the summer window, a new head coach as well, and they made 8 changes for that cup game. And then the Blackburn win against 10 men. Blackburn, I would expect, I think I might even have said that they were going to get relegated in our pre-season predictions. So, any Championship away win is tough, as we've certainly seen from Norwich City over the last couple of years, definitely. But I think in terms of just the pure quality of the players they're coming up against, and also the momentum that the home side has going into the game, this is going to be their toughest test yet. It's going to be quite a difficult one, and if they can come out of it with a win, and this is always the positive when we talk about difficult games, it will be a serious statement, not only externally in terms of bringing fans along with them, which I think Blackburn really helped them to do and is clearly very important for them in terms of the support that they're getting and the mood that they want from that fan base, but also internally, I think giving some of those players the belief after certainly a difficult season last season, when you got the feeling that inside the club and at Colney in the week, the mood wasn't great towards the end of the season. It was pretty downtrodden. It was pretty miserable. To just tell that dressing room that they are good enough to be competing with these top teams in the Championship, I think that would be absolutely huge. But for me, if they are to win this game, it will have to be their best performance as a team over the course of the 90 minutes. And yes, they've shown that they can hold on to wins, and they can do that in the last 15-20 minutes. They can really show that grit and that toughness, but you've got to be the better side for at least a portion of the game in that first 60-70 minutes, where that lead will be established and where you need to make your impression on the game and to do that. So I think if they can get a win from tomorrow's game, it will be absolutely huge for the mood. But certainly Coventry won't have any fears going into it after how they've started the season. And you look at the team that they've got, also the continuity from last season, which Manning actually highlighted in his pre-match press conference. It's definitely going to be a tough one.
It is, and of course it's more wider. Obviously, on a more wider point, it's a really key block of games that obviously starts with Coventry and ends with the small matter of the East Anglian derby next month in 3 weeks or so now, with games against Wrexham, Stoke, and West Brom in between. 5 games that feel quite tough, and I'd agree with Shaney's point here in terms of it. It feels like, again, I'm always quite wary of labelling something like that as a massive run of games, because they all feel huge, of course, in the context of a 46-game season. But certainly in terms of Norwich trying to establish themselves as a key player in that playoff race or promotion picture, and as you said there, in terms of the mood and internal belief, it feels like quite an important stretch of games for those things, as much as it is probably points on the board and what it actually means for a Championship table, which, let's be honest, at this stage is very little. And come the next international break, it will be 9 games. And again, you can, as Coventry proved last season, you can be in a bad place in October, but it may be in a much better place. It can change so quickly in this league. So it's not decisive for their season, but in terms of those aspects you spoke about, it feels like a really key block for them.
Yeah, definitely. And I think for a few reasons. I mean, you mentioned the table there, and obviously you can't take anything from league position, and you won't be able to going into the next international break unless, obviously there'll be certain teams who have very low points totals that I'm sure are worried for the future. But for Norwich, I don't think you'll be able to take anything from the league table position going into the next international break. But ultimately, 3 points now are as valuable for that end total as they are at the end of the season. And when you look back, there will always be occasions that you can look back on, even in August and September, where that should have been 3 points. That should have been an extra point that maybe would have pushed you into the playoff positions. And I'm sure for that reason, as quite a pragmatic, ambitious head coach, Liam Manning will be extra focused on these games, because we know they're already thinking about promotion. So I think the points are still important, even if you can't take loads from the actual table at this stage of the season. But also what I'd highlight, and this is kind of away from obviously tomorrow's game, but is the fact that they've got a couple of winnable home games. I think Wrexham, although obviously they've done some very good transfer business, they've spent a lot of money, they're kind of similar to Norwich in terms of getting everyone used to each other and kind of adapting very quickly to the Championship. I think that game at home probably gives them a better opportunity to pick up 3 points than they've had at any other point in the season. And I feel like there have been a couple of occasions where, as I wrote about in that piece that I referenced, you can see that even though the Blackburn win did boost the mood a little bit, you can see that it's still kind of teetering on the edge. And if they did lose a game, it would still probably tip back into the sort of negativity that we were seeing just after they sold Marcelino Nunez to Ipswich. So I think definitely right now, fans will be going to Coventry feeling positive and certainly very ready to cheer their team on, as they always do away from home. But I think, and at home, but I think if they yeah, if they did get a poor result against Coventry, I'm not sure the positive feeling at the moment would survive that result, even though Coventry are pretty good and even though they've had a strong start to the season. So for me, certainly in terms of the mood, in terms of the statement that they want to make and the ambition, it still feels important, even if, you know, after that Blackburn win, it can feel like you're over the hump and everything's great. And as it kind of did, it felt very sanguine over the international break. But yeah, that can change quickly. And that's another reason why this trip to Coventry is really important for them.
Absolutely. We're at that stage of the show now where we're going to come on to predictions. Before we do that, I'll obviously give you the answer to the player of the month things. I'll go in reverse order. So obviously 2 last season were won by Borja Sainz, who counts as one player, which is where I got a little bit confused. Then you have to go back to hang on, let me find the exact month of it. Let me find it. So you have Borja Sainz obviously in October and September of last year. You have to go back to August 2023 for Gabriel Sara, who was the Norwich player to win it before those. You then have to go back to 2021 to a certain Finnish international in Teemu Pukki, who won it, and his win was the first in just shy of a decade. You have to then go back to April 2011 and Canada's finest Simeon Jackson, who won it on the back of what it was, that excellent goal scoring run that he had at the end of that season. I mean, it's remarkable to think that Norwich City won the league in 18-19 and didn't have a single player who won the Player of the Month award, with Teemu Pukki hitting 30 goals or whatever he scored, and Emi Buendia, as ridiculous as he was in that second title winning campaign, never won a Player of the Month award, which, you could argue shows the value of these things, but we'll take it with Josh Sargent winning it. Right, let's come to predictions then. We, of course, want to know yours as well. We've had Nigel's already, who went for a 3-2 win earlier in the show. Plenty of goals. So comment yours up and we'll flash them on the screen for the next couple of minutes or so as Sam is talking. Sam, kick us off. How do you see it going tomorrow afternoon in the Midlands for that Paddy Davitt derby?
Yeah, I think... I feel like every time we talk something up, and that being football, it always stops at the point you start talking about it, and as soon as it becomes a real thing, that's when it ends. And I just feel like on the back of an international break, after which, football does tend to be quite poor, and the games do tend to be kind of teams still recovering and players recovering, increasingly in the modern game as well, from long flights and from trips all over the world. I would be surprised, to be honest, if it's a 3-2 and if it's a game as entertaining and exciting and kind of swashbuckling as maybe some of Coventry's games so far this season. But I think both teams are relatively well matched. I think Norwich obviously have been good away from home, and Manning will have the nous to try to eke out a result against a good side. But I don't see Norwich being quite good enough to win the game. So I'm going to say 1-1, which I think would probably be a slightly better result for Norwich than Coventry, just because Coventry are at home. I don't think they'll get another away win, but I don't think Norwich fans would be particularly disappointed with a point away from home against Coventry. So yeah, I'm going to go for a boring 1-1 and a disappointing one when you look at Coventry's results so far this season. What are you expecting, Connor?
Yeah, I'm probably very similar to you, really. I think if I had to pick someone to edge it, I'd go with Coventry just because of the stability they have. They didn't do that much in the transfer market. We've seen, I think, with Millwall and Middlesbrough, probably the importance of stability and continuity at this early point in the season, where, Norwich are still trying to, for all the reasons we discussed in the opening 53 minutes of this show, still trying to find their way a little bit in combinations on the pitch. So I think and obviously the home factor as well, I think it's going to be close to 30,000. It's their first home game, I think, since they I know maybe that was announced on the day of QPR, where they've purchased their stadium, so there's clearly going to be that feel good factor there as well. But hopefully, I think Norwich have the goals in them with Josh Sargent, and hopefully some others can come to the party as well to get a point. So I'm going to agree with Benny's comment there and go for a 2-2, which I think could be a quite entertaining game given the way the teams have been going, and hopefully some more positive signs creatively that Norwich are moving in the right direction. I agree with you, a point away at Coventry. I think most teams in the Championship would be very content with that if you offer them. If they could go and win it, as you say, I think it would be a major statement of intent to do that, and to obviously prolong that brilliant record they have at the CBS Arena as well would be golden. The last time they lost to Coventry, Sam, do you know when that was year wise? You could probably just do the maths in terms of the record.
2010, 2011?
Close. You're a couple of years out. 2008.
Yeah.
So that was 2-1. The two scorers for Coventry, one had played for Norwich and was quite popular, and one would go on to play for Norwich. I'll give you a clue. I've spoken to one of them this morning, so you'll know. That will give you an answer as to who one of those are. But it's a tease that we've got something coming with one of those goal scorers from that day, reflecting on their respective spells at the clubs, as we like to do before games as well. So you'll be able to check that out at pinken.com probably tomorrow morning, although the timings haven't quite worked out yet. So it might be before or after then. Just keep your eye out and it will come. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching along, be that on Facebook, Pinken, or on X. Of course, if you joined us late, you can watch the full broadcast on our YouTube page, or I think on either of those pages as well. We're now on TikTok, so you can follow us there. Is it an @ on TikTok? Showing my age here, but
Probably.
It's _Pinken.
I think you're even better at TikTok than me. I might be even worse. So you're the man.
So yeah, it'd just be worth it for comedic value as we try and navigate how that platform actually works, because it's actually a lot more complicated than I thought it was when we started it a couple of days ago. Instagram as well, you can follow us all on there, and then of course pinken.com for all of the words and whatnot as well. And we'll be at the CBS Arena tomorrow, as will a lot of Norwich City fans, hoping for some more positivity and 3 points as well. Thank you very much for joining us on your Friday lunchtime, and we'll see you again very soon.